Hello everyone, this is your friend Shinobi Nexus 2.0 and we are back in new fanfic. What if Naruto's secret hobby got exposed in class? Part 3. Kiba was not a happy teenager. Maybe it was the fact that he had spent the better part of the last 2 days living nomadically inside bushes, gutters, and briefly even a festering sewer as the search for the crime lord, Gato, took him, Akamaru, and his partner from one side of the city to the other. Or maybe it was being cramped for far too long alongside his teammate, Asuka, who as well as being ridiculously beautiful, also just so happened to be the most sarcastic and cynical person he had ever met. Or it could have been that Akamaru, his faithful dog, had gone too close to him one time too many. But most likely it was a combination of all of these that contributed to his foul disposition. Do you think you could move any slower, Kiba? Asuka asked. Kiba bit his tongue, resisting the urge to throw some scathing retort back, and instead slogged forward, shimmying on his belly through the thick undergrowth. He knew it would do no good to start bickering. Besides, even if he did, Asuka undoubtedly had some clever comeback prepared that he would have no hope of topping. 48 hours of exchanging insults had proven that already. Women, he growled softly, poking his head through the bushes. Beside him, Akamaru whined sympathetically. You better not have lost them. Asuka glowered at her teammate. Again, Kiba had to fight the temptation to say something nasty, or even better, flick her in the back of the head while she was facing away from him. It would have been juvenile and immature, but oh what vindictive satisfaction it would bring him. There was really no denying it. Asuka was a real bitch. Unfortunately, for Kiba, the red-haired archer just so happened to be very pretty, a terrible combination in the young Inuzuka's book of ideal girls. Ugly nice girls were neutral, nice pretty girls were the best, ugly mean girls were also not bad because you could make fun of them without feeling guilty, but mean pretty girls were by far the worst. You couldn't hate them because they were hot, but you couldn't like them either because they were liable to bite your balls off with, or without a reason. Still, Kiba had decided a while ago that while Asuka's constant, insulting commentary did little for his oral welfare, his eyes would not suffer in the slightest during the mission. The tight, black outfit she wore did amazing things to her slim, athletic body, and on more than one occasion did Asuka catch him staring. I see them, Kiba snarled. They'd been tracking Gato for the last 6 hours, no small task given the tedious nature of the assignment. In the morning, Gato left his hotel, which they had identified the day before, and led the two ninjas all over the city as he went about his business, none of which was important. He ate breakfast, met with clients, visited his 3 mistresses, ate lunch etc. A monotonous routine that threatened to lull Kiba to sleep. Finally, after yet another pointless meeting, Gato had gotten into a limousine with some man. They had driven deep into the countryside, finally stopping in a remote, grassy field far removed from the city. I also see the 50 mercenaries he has with him, Kiba added. Sure enough, waiting for the crime lord was a giant entourage of heavily armed men. None of them looked like ninjas, though. They were probably just hired muscle that Gato's servants had recruited in town. Something important has to be happening if there's this many. The 2 men walked toward the mercenaries. The first man was their target, Gato, a short, businessman, with frizzy white hair and bulging belly that his expensive designer suit did little to disguise. The second man Kiba did not know. He was tall with long black hair that extended halfway down the side of his face, a face that was gorgeous according to Asuka's opinion. Kiba thought it was feminine looking, the kind of soft-featured handsome that automatically made the owner look like a pretty boy if not downright queer. Of course, Asuka ignored his derogatory comments about the man. Never mind that he might be a terrorist or a criminal, he was gorgeous, and thus automatically elevated to a plane impervious to criticism. Their mystery man wore a long black cloak that was decorated with a pattern of swirling red clouds. It seemed to be a uniform of sorts. It certainly did not appear to be the kind of attire one normally walked around in without cause anyway. People would laugh. Well, Kiba would anyway. He's wearing a forehead protector, Asuka whispered. Kiba had noticed that as well, and that was what had him concerned. The emblem of the Hidden Leaf Village was emblazoned on the man's protector, and a deep scratch ran through the metal plating, a testament perhaps to some battle he had survived where others had not. Kiba knew most of the ninjas in the village, and the fact that he did not recognize this one bothered him. What worried him even more than that was that Konoha had another ninja operating in Kakami, a ninja Tsunade had not bothered to tell their team about. Either this man was Black Ops and running his own mission, or he wasn't working for Konoha at all. He made a mental note to tell Instructor Kakashi about that as soon as they reported back in, but for now he returned his attention to the meeting. Gato seemed livid, jumping up and down and screaming curses at the mercenaries. "Where are those two?" he yelled. "I told them to be here." "Maybe they got lost," one of the mercenaries suggested. "Lost? Lost, Captain," Gato shouted in the face of the unfortunate man. "They're Junin. 2 very expensive Junin. Junin do not get lost." Asuka stirred beside Kiba. "Junin," she whispered, the apprehension evident in her voice. Tsunade said Chunin at most. "Quiet down," Kiba replied. He was impressed that he managed to sound so calm. In fact, his stomach was doing cartwheels right about now, making him feel more than a little nauseated. Against Chunin, Kiba was confident he and Asuka could hold their own. But against Junin were the elite, the best of the best. Genin would not stand an Ice Cub's chance in hell against a single Junin, never mind two. "Why do you need Junin bodyguards?" the man asked. His voice was calm, monotonous even. "Are you afraid of something?" No. Of course not," Gato stammered quickly. "I'm just angry that my money is being wasted on incompetent employees." The man nodded as if in understanding, but then he said, "I'm beginning to feel my time is being wasted on incompetence. Should I grow angry?" The fat crime lord paled visibly. "I apologize for the delay. I promise I'll make the delivery soon." "You're running out of time, Gato," the man said quietly. "Deliver me the QB alive and unharmed and you shall be paid. I do not enjoy waiting. And you're sure the QB is inside this boy? This Naruto?" Gato asked nervously. Kiba and Asuka inhaled sharply and exchanged alarmed glances. These guys weren't dealing in illegal contraband, the report had said. They were here after the QB. And that meant they were after its container too, Uzumaki Naruto. This could not be a coincidence. They were counting on Naruto and the QB inside him to be assigned to Kakami, but why? What in the world would they want to do with a dormant demonic fox and a perverted, loudmouthed, trouble-making ninja? "This is a goddamn trap," Kiba whispered. "Someone wanted us to come here. You think this is all a setup?" Asuka wondered. But the only people who knew about this mission was. Kiba shook his head. Konoha must have a spy then. Someone either leaked the mission personnel to Gato in advance or made sure Naruto was put here. But who? That was the magic question, a question that was without an answer at the moment. There could be 100 different people inside the Hidden Leaf Village who would abet their enemies, or there might be none at all. Kiba was not knowledgeable enough about the inner workings of the village to even begin suspecting whose loyalties were suspect. "Meet me at the bridge tomorrow morning," the man told Gato. "And make sure you have the QB." Gato bowed deeply, the top of his frizzy hair almost touching the ground. "It will be as you say." The robed ninja turned and his gaze swept over the green countryside. Kiba stiffened as he felt the man's eyes pass over the bushes they were hiding in. "But first," the stranger said, "I believe we have some uninvited visitors eavesdropping on our conversation." Asuka and Kiba froze. They were spotted. How they had been found they had absolutely no idea, but that was unimportant right now. It was time to bail, and fast. Simultaneously they exploded from their hiding place, weapons drawn and ready for battle. Asuka was armed with her bow, Kiba with his kunai, and Akamaru with his fangs. Gato appeared absolutely dumbstruck by the sudden appearance of two Konoha ninjas and one very large wolf, a look of utter shock plastered on his fat face. He stammered for something to say, finally settling with, "Kill them." The mercenaries responded eagerly to their employer's command, raising their weapons with a hearty cheer and then running toward the two ninjas. Even when faced with imminent death at the hands of 100 angry mercenaries, Kiba somehow found the time to appreciate Asuka's talent with the bow. Her hands moved faster than his eyes could follow, stringing an arrow and releasing it with unbelievable speed. And what more, her accuracy was incredible. 5 arrows were released in the space of a few heartbeats and 5 more corpses were added to the battlefield. Another mercenary went down as an arrow took him through the heart, but it seemed for every enemy that Asuka felled from her bow's deadly precision, another 2 stepped forward to take their place. Kiba and Akamaru were faring little better. The duo cut a deadly swath through Gato's forces, Kiba wielding his kunai and Akamaru his razor-sharp teeth, but their best efforts still did little to stem the endless deluge of mercenaries. Akamaru lunged forward, his fangs ripping through the throat of a mercenary who had strayed too close to the wolf, and Kiba finished the job by hurling one of his shurikens in between the man's eyes. Another of the sellswords, braver than the rest, rushed at Kiba, sword held high ready to strike. Before he could make it to the young ninja, he suddenly pitched forward into the mud, one of Asuka's arrows lodged in his back. "There's too many," Kiba yelled as he dispatched another mercenary with a kunai across the man's throat. Akamaru growled in agreement. The wolf's sleek white fur was covered in blood and gore, and Kiba was afraid that not all of it belonged to the mercenaries. "We need to retreat." Asuka was too busy to even acknowledge Kiba. She ducked under a knife that would have plunged in her head, and stabbed the mercenary with the tip of an arrow. Standing back up, she then notched the same arrow and released the shaft into the face of another enemy. "It'll be tough," she pointed out in a momentary lull in the carnage. It did not last long. In seconds, more mercenaries were pouring towards them, and Asuka returned to thinning their ranks with her rapid barrage of arrows. She fired off another shot, hitting a man in the side of the head, and reached for another arrow. Only, this time, her hand closed around air. "I'm out," yelled the archer. She slung her bow over her shoulder and drew a curved knife from her belt. Kiba swore. He had to think fast. Without Asuka's bow they would not be able to hold back the mercenaries for too much longer. He hated the idea of running, but if they didn't do something fast, they would be overrun. Gritting his teeth in determination, he plunged his kunai in the chest of one of Gato's thugs and leapt to where Asuka was. "Get out of here," he yelled to his teammate. "Me and Akamaru will hold them off." "What? And leave you here? Forget it. One of us has to get this information back," he yelled. "We'll do it together then. I'm not leaving you here by yourself." Kiba hesitated. As touching as it was that Asuka was determined to stay by his side, he did not have time to argue with her. He normally respected stubbornness because his mother claimed he was one of the most stubborn people she had the misfortune of knowing, but right now it was the last thing he needed. "Asuka, move your ass now. That's an order." The red-haired archer glared at the wolf trainer. Tsunade had put Kiba in charge of their 2-man team for the mission, and according to Konoha law she was obliged to follow his orders. She had thought Kiba was a gutless coward, the kind of guy who would never dare to exert his position in fear of what a beautiful girl like her might think of him afterwards. He was in command, true, but Asuka had never really expected him to use it. "You better be right behind me," she snapped irritably. She loathed the prospect of leaving Kiba by himself, especially now that her respect for him had just leapt a notch. But orders were orders. Kiba kept a careful eye on the mercenaries. Some were pulling back, dragging their dead and wounded with them. He estimated that together the 2 ninjas had wiped out almost half of Gato's forces during the fierce skirmish. The odds of facing the survivors alone were still not good, but he and Akamaru would manage. They would have to. I have a few tricks up my sleeve. Get going, he told her. Asuka nodded and then vanished in a cloud of smoke. Kiba quickly reached into his pouch and unleashed a hailstorm of shurikens to cover his partner's retreat. The mercenaries scattered, too occupied with their own safety to even think of pursuing the fleeing ninja. A few were too slow in evading, and they cried out as one of his projectiles found their mark. Nervously, the young Inuzuka looked for Asuka. She was out of sight already, but he needed to buy her a little bit more time if she was to make good on her escape. Come on, you bastards! Kiba yelled. What are you waiting for? But none of the mercenaries responded to his boisterous challenge. They were falling back, many of them wounded from the brief but deadly battle, but stepping forward to take their place on the blood-stained battlefield was none other than the man, the feminine-looking stranger. He walked amongst the corpses, unfazed by the carnage, and stopped in the middle of the grassy plain. Only one of you. The young Inuzuka laughed. Don't waste our time, right, Akamaru? Akamaru did not seem to share his master's confidence or enthusiasm. He whined softly, his ears twitching erratically as he stared at their new opponent. This instantly put Kiba on guard. Akamaru was scared, and Kiba thought he knew why. His power is that high, huh? Kiba asked quietly. The white wolf had the unique ability to detect a ninja's power levels through smell, but never had they encountered an air of strength great enough to cower Akamaru. A few of the instructors made Akamaru nervous with the intensity of the power they radiated, but none had had this kind of effect on him before. Akamaru barked a confirmation. Why didn't you tell me that before? Kiba complained. An annoyed growl was his only answer. Yeah, I guess it wouldn't have made a difference. The dog's master consented. The man walked closer, his robes billowing as a cool breeze whipped through the clearing. Kiba could feel the powerful aura manifesting in the man, a presence so pronounced it might as well have been real. It was like an invisible wall surrounded the unknown ninja, a barrier of potent energy that sent an electrifying sensation through Kiba's body merely by standing within its radius. The man moved slowly towards Kiba, lethargically as if he did not have a care in the world. An Inuzuka clan ninja, the man said. Interesting. Kiba nodded. You're from Konoha. He stated. What are you doing working with Gato? The man did not answer. He looked at Gato, a lethal gaze in his eyes, and said, I'll deal with this Gato, but be warned. Any more interruptions and he left the threat incomplete, allowing Gato imagination to decide what deadly consequences may await him. Gato nodded in hasty consent. No, I mean, why yes. Thank you. A small grin stretched across Kiba's mouth, his fang-like teeth barred in a feral smile. So the man was not open to listening. Big surprise there. That was probably the reason why ninjas were generally poor negotiators. Most of them just wanted to kill things. War was a ninja's occupation, not peace. We're some of the best ninjas in Konoha, he told the stranger. You'd better not underestimate us. Razor claw technique. Kiba yelled. On command, chakra poured into his hands and his nails began to grow at an incredible rate. Within seconds they were as long as his arm, each talon thin and as hard as metal, transforming his hands into a bristling arsenal of razor-sharp knives. Grinning, he flexed his fingers, letting each of his claws resound noisily against one another in an intimidating chorus of bone clashing against bone. Beside him, Akamaru, encouraged by his master's courage, leapt back to his feet and growled menacingly at the stranger, his pointy fangs bared savagely. Let's go, Akamaru, he yelled. Together they charged ahead. Akamaru attacked first, throwing his formidable bulk at the man, but the stranger quickly stepped aside and Akamaru flew by harmlessly. Kiba was right after his hound, unleashing a brutal array of lightning-fast strikes with his claws. He struck again and again with a berserker's ferocity, his hands an untraceable blur of motion. Akamaru leapt forward again, his teeth targeting the man's legs. However, none of their blows connected. The robe-clad ninja moved out of harm's way, easily swaying in and out of the duo's onslaught. With a snarled curse, Kiba ordered Akamaru to break off the attack. He was breathing heavily, the fatigue from the fighting settling into his weary body. The white wolf peered up at Kiba inquisitively, confusion evident in his hazel eyes. Countless hours of training had honed their fighting so that they moved in sync with each other, enabling them to fight as a pair in perfect harmony. In theory, the combination of Akamaru's size and Kiba's speed should have been enough to defeat most normal ninjas. This man, however, apparently was anything but normal. The standard has sure fallen for a Konoha ninja if this is the best it has to offer, the man remarked scornfully. Kiba could not think of anything to say. For the first time he felt genuinely afraid. Even though he and Akamaru had been fighting for the last 10 minutes, never had Kiba actually felt like their lives were in any real danger. The mercenaries, while many in number, were nothing compared to the skill of a ninja. But this man, this stranger, was completely different. He outclassed them so greatly Kiba could seldom comprehend it. The two had just thrown some of their best techniques at the ninja and had absolutely nothing to show for it. He's not a Junin, Kiba realized fearfully, cold sweat pouring down his brow. Junin aren't even this good. Why do you want Naruto? He asked. What are you going to do with him? Again, he was surprised by how steady his voice sounded, devoid of the icy fear that coursed through his veins. He was terrified of the man's power, but he would not show it. He was Inuzuka Kiba, a Konoha ninja, and if he was going to die here he would do so in a manner that would make his friends proud. The man paused. When he spoke, his cold, emotionless voice managed to sound pleasantly surprised. You're a friend of the Kyuubi. Good, that will make this easier. You want me to use him as bait? Gato asked, realizing his client's idea. Are you sure that's a? Proceed as planned, Gato. The ninja interrupted. Keep this one alive. The Kyuubi will no doubt try to rescue him. I'll be waiting when he does. Kiba glared at the two men. Now wait a second, what makes you think I'm going? But he never finished his sentence. 1 second the robe-clad ninja was speaking with Gato, and the next he was gone. Something hard hit Kiba in the back of the head, and before he even realized it, he felt himself falling. He tried to stop himself, but his hands and legs would not respond. The ground rushed up to meet him, and a jarring sensation rocked his body as his head hit the floor. And then everything went dark. Tenten did not normally consider herself a particularly skeptical person. She liked to think that she was a person who trusted others unless evidence persuaded her otherwise. The problem was that her present skepticism was founded on evidence that had little trouble in persuading her that her doubt was entirely justified. Now the problem was not a matter of whether or not her reservations were correct or not, but more who the subject of said cynicism was, and this subsequently led to yet another complication in the Tenten's progressively growing causal chain of problems. She did not trust Hatake Kakashi. That was the first problem. The second was that he was in charge of the mission, and short of sneaking up and murdering the masked ninja, that complication would unfortunately remain unresolved. It was not that she disliked Kakashi. He was a great teacher and a nice guy. But he hardly seemed the type to be participating on missions, let alone leading 6 genin on an important B-rank one. For starters, the man was so careless in his approach to leadership it denied any assumption that he might actually be any good at it. Since she and Neji had arrived at the safe house, Kakashi had not stirred from his spot on the moldy sofa, his head glued into that pink novel he always carried around. The provocative pose that the protagonist assumed on the book's cover did not escape Tenten's notice, nor did the glaring yellow label that declared the book not appropriate for the ninja under 18. Perhaps she could forgive the perverted connotation that the book associated to, graciously excusing it as an eccentric quirk that all instructors seem to possess, but his utter apathy to their team's objectives and missions could not be overlooked. Kakashi just did not seem to care. He hardly looked up when Naruto and Hinata entered the house shortly after Neji and Tenten did, not even bothering to check if they were enemy ninjas in disguise, nor had he even begun unpacking the boxes of mission-critical equipment Tsunade had sent with him. In addition, the white-haired ninja was absolutely oblivious to the fact that Sasuke and Sakura were over an hour late for the briefing. Tenten frowned. Her critical opinion about their instructor was tempered by the knowledge that he had been Anbu several years ago, and that he was a Junin. But his current, inexcusable behavior did not seem at all in keeping with the stories of the expert tactician and fearless war hero that people talked about. If the stories of his courage and brilliance were true, then it could only mean that today's Kakashi was only a pale shadow of his former greatness. What once was one of the Hidden Leaf's finest ninjas was no more than lazy pervert, lying on the sofa and laughing stupidly at some stupid punch line derived from an erotic novel. Could this really be the same legendary Kakashi that was so lauded in Konoha lore? Oh, hero, you're so naughty, Kakashi chuckled to himself. Apparently not. Instructor Kakashi? Naruto asked. He was sitting against a wall beside Hinata. Both had changed into their normal clothing and their formal attire was now hanging in the other room to dry. Shouldn't we be looking for Sasuke and Sakura? Kakashi peered over the novel, looking at his student with his one visible eye. They're probably doing some early reconnaissance. Neji, who was leaning casually on the boarded-up window on the other side of the safe house, said, then shouldn't we also be doing the same? The silver-haired Junin shook his head. Going back to his reading, he explained, we wait for Kiba and Asuka to report in and we'll make our plans accordingly. Spreading our forces right now would not be wise until we have a better idea of what we're facing. But, Instructor Kakashi, Hinata protested. What if Sasuke and Sakura are in trouble? Shouldn't we be looking to help them? Kakashi sighed. You kids worry too much. Tenten scowled. I don't think you worry enough, Instructor. The Junin did not look disturbed by his student's apparent disapproval in his orders. In fact, he was once again so absorbed in his novel that Tenten was not even sure he had heard her. Naruto stood up and began pacing back and forth across the room. He looked restless, but that was only characteristic of Naruto. If he didn't have something to do, he would find something to do, normally at the detriment of everyone around him. Guys like Neji could stand still like a statue for hours on end without batting an eye, but asking Naruto to be patient for even 5 minutes was pushing it. Tenten vaguely wondered how much longer it would be until Naruto knocked down the boarded-up window and started throwing things at pedestrians outside. It certainly would not be the first time something like that had happened. This is a B-rank mission, Naruto complained, we should be doing something. We are doing something, Naruto, Kakashi murmured from behind the book. We're waiting. I agree with Naruto, Hinata whispered timidly. I don't think we should be waiting when our friends may need help. Tenten nodded. I'm with Hinata on this one, Instructor. What about you, Neji? Neji kind of shrugged, which Tenten interpreted as a yes. So we all think we should deploy, Naruto declared, crossing his arms. What do you think about that, Instructor Kakashi? The book lowered once again, and Naruto's bravado faltered as Kakashi looked up at his students. Had they finally pushed the white-haired teacher's patience too far? But then Kakashi smiled and pleasantly said, well, we should be all grateful that this isn't a democracy then, right? The troublemaking ninja frowned, hesitant to continue in case he ticked Kakashi off. Getting 1,000 years of pain up his butt was not exactly what he wanted at the moment, particularly not in front of Tenten and Hinata. Fortunately, Tenten jumped in to support him. We can't just leave them out there. Kiba and Asuka's report is late and so is Sasuke and Sakura's. I think at least one team should go out and investigate. She told Kakashi. Are you volunteering your team, Tenten? The Junin asked. Yes, I am. Tenten replied without hesitation. Kakashi nodded pensively as if some revelation had just dawned on him. Huh, he said quietly, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Then louder, he added, request denied. I need all personnel here if we need to move in force. We already have 2 scouting teams in place, one more would be a waste of resources. He yawned and sat up, swinging his legs around and planting his feet on the ground. Why don't you guys get some sleep? No telling when we'll get a chance to rest again. I'm not tired, replied Naruto. The rest of the ninjas echoed his sentiments. Suit yourselves, said Kakashi, shrugging his shoulders indifferently. He snapped his paperback close, stowed it away in his vest, and then with a languid yawn, laid his head against the sofa's armrest. Wake me up if something important happens. Instructor Kakashi. All the ninjas screamed in unison. Well, all the ninjas except for Neji, who had not said much of anything since arriving. Composed and silent as always, he appeared rather impartial to his classmates' efforts to crucify their instructor, much to Tenten's resentment. They were supposed to be a team, especially when dissenting against established authority. What? Groaned Kakashi. You're a Junin. You should act like one. Naruto yelled angrily. The white-haired Junin's eye cracked open and glared at the troublemaking ninja peevishly. What do you want me to do? Run around the city and start flipping out all over the place? Maybe cut some people's heads off while I'm at it? Hinata raised her hand, as if waiting for her teacher to call on her in the classroom, and stammered, I don't think that's what Naruto meant. I think we're all just worried about. Don't try to apologize for us, Hinata, protested Tenten. We're all together on this one, right, Neji? Neji did not answer. It took a moment for Tenten to realize he had followed Kakashi's advice and had fallen asleep. How he managed to do that while standing was beyond her. Well, all of us except for Neji, the brunette markswoman corrected herself, casting a nasty look at her sleeping partner. Can I push him over? Naruto asked Hinata. The blue-haired ninja shook her head, and much to Tenten's surprise, he actually listened to her. Was it Tenten's imagination, or were Hinata and Naruto friendlier than they had been before the mission? A week ago Hinata wouldn't even dare speak to Naruto, and now they were sitting next to each other, joking and laughing. It was amazing what a few days did to relationships. It was a shame her crush Tenten took the opportunity to throw another scathing glance at Neji was currently asleep. Kakashi sighed and closed his eye again. Well, if you're all quite done, I'm going back to. Just then the door exploded, and a red-haired girl clad in black leather burst into the room. Her hair was drenched in sweat, matted to her skull, and she was holding her side, a grimace of pain on her face. Blood soaked her shirt, dripping down her leg and forming a crimson trail behind her. Asuka! Tenten screamed. She raced over to her friend and supported her. A large cut stretched across her back and along her abdomen, but the archer still seemed coherent enough despite the massive amount of blood she must have lost. Help me move her to the couch. Quickly, Naruto and Hinata ran to Tenten's assistance. I'm never going to get back to sleep. The Junin muttered wearily, rolling off the dilapidated sofa so that they could lay the wounded ninja on it. Hinata, get some hot water, Tenten ordered. She drew a knife from her belt and began cutting away at Asuka's shirt while Hinata disappeared into the kitchen. Naruto peered a little closer, interestedly noticing just how much of Asuka's outfit was ending up on the floor. Tenten must have spied him trying to steal a peek, because she suddenly punched him in the face. It was not a hard punch. Naruto had received far worse from Sakura, but it was enough to knock him backwards. Thankfully, Kakashi caught the blonde-haired ninja before he hit the ground. All boys get out! The brunette shrieked at the assembled trio. While Hinata began bandaging the wounded Asuka, Tenten bossily shoved the boys into the next room and loudly slammed the door shut. What the hell just happened? The blonde, spiky-haired ninja wondered. Girls, Neji muttered. The boys looked at their teacher. He was sitting on a nearby wooden stool, his masked nose once again buried in the pink novel. He giggled something that sounded like, scandalous. And then subsided into silence, once again thoroughly engrossed in his own private world of perverted erotic literature. Naruto wrinkled his nose. You're so gross, Instructor Kakashi. Still not talking to me? Uchiha Sasuke asked. He was sitting on one of the room's small beds clad only in a pair of trousers with water still dripping from his damp hair. He looked at Sakura, who was sitting on the bed opposite of his, determinedly staring up at the ceiling to avoid his gaze. She had been like that since they had left the casino over 3 hours ago and relocated to a new hotel that Haku had led them to. The eerie quiet that filled the room was unsettling. Usually the pink-haired ninja never left Sasuke alone, obsessing over him like a lost puppy in search of a loving master, and this stony silent treatment was definitely something new. Sakura snorted and crossed her arms across his chest defiantly. Since they arrived, at Haku's urging, both had decided to shower and change out of their wet clothes, and now Sakura was clad in a simple villager's tunic and leggings. I said I was sorry about not telling you my complete plan, honey, Sasuke continued when Sakura refused to respond. So what's the problem? Sakura's eyebrow twitched and once again that murderous desire to punch something arose within the female ninja. The wall, the lamp, Sasuke's gorgeous face. She needed something to serve as an outlet for her scarcely restrained rage. The audacity of that bastard to even ask her what was her problem. Had he not just gambled her virginity to a lecherous creep? Had he not just used not only her body but also her loyalty to him? Had that selfish asshole even considered her feelings before plunging into this cesspool of stupidity? If there was one word that could sum up her feelings at the moment, it would be enough. She had had enough of his bullshit, pure and simple. She still loved Sasuke with all her heart, but right now her amorous affection for the Uchiha was being held in check by her overwhelming anger towards him. She looked around the room. Ninja training told her it was probably wired with hidden microphones that were eavesdropping on their conversation, so she chose her next words very, very carefully. My problem with you, dear, Sakura said slowly, venomous acid dripping from every word, is that you are an arrogant, egocentric, heartless, irresponsible, big-headed prick. Sasuke blinked with his mouth open ajar, stunned at the vicious, acrimoniousness of Sakura's tirade. Sakura was also a little surprised at her own daring, but she pressed on before her brazen courage failed her. I don't care who you are or who you think you might be, she snarled angrily. Like it or not, I'm your goddamn partner. If you do something so stupid again without my permission, and I swear I will hurt you so bad that it'll make the beating I gave Naruto look like a love tap. Sasuke did not say anything at first. Unable to meet Sakura's intense glare, he stared at the floor, his hands folded in his lap as the silence in the room dragged on. For the first time Sakura saw perhaps what Sasuke was really like. His mask of arrogance, pride, and narcissism had crumbled under the fury of Sakura's verbal assaults, leaving a deflated shadow of the smug Uchiha Sasuke. Gone were the boastful jibes and the feeling of omnipotence, the smirks and the condescending scowls. They were replaced with something that Sasuke had seldom experienced before, humility. She watched Sasuke. Without the holier-than-thou attitude he proudly wore like a ninja wore his forehead protector, Sasuke seemed almost human. On the outside he could be a real jerk sometimes, but deep down on the inside, there was a person who genuinely cared about his friends. I see, Sasuke said. He reached for the shirt Haku had provided and pulled it over his head. It's a shame that's the way you feel. Sakura's eyes narrowed and the flicker of hope extinguished in a painful gust of reality. Nothing had changed in Sasuke. He really was just an asshole. Yeah, isn't it? Sakura shot back. The real catastrophe in this terrible tragedy, of course, was that even though she harbored these pessimistic thoughts, she still loved for some unclear reason. He was a jerk and she loved him. He mistreated her and she loved him. Maybe she was just a masochist, thriving on the pain he caused her. What a sick thought. The door to the room opened, and Haku walked in. She too had changed out of her dress and into a pair of green and white robes. She was also wearing a forehead protector, and the metal plating bore the insignia of a ninja from the hidden village of the Mist. Sasuke whispered under his breath. The pretty ninja smiled warmly at the two Konoha ninjas. I trust the clothes suit your needs. Sakura nodded. Yes, thank you, Ms. Haku. You are very generous. Think nothing of it, Haku replied. I do apologize for this wait, but please, let me know if I can make your stay more comfortable. Sasuke rose from his bed. You can tell us what exactly we're waiting for. I thought we were going to meet Gato. You will in due time, Haku assured her guests. But we're waiting for my master first. Your master? Inquired Sakura in alarm. Calculating from Haku's impressive feat of assassinating Tonka only hours before, Sakura estimated that their host was at least a Chunin-ranked ninja. If she had a master or a mentor, then he would undoubtedly be a Junin, and that would be unquestionably bad. Haku's smile grew larger, as if the mere topic of her master was enough to inspire great gladness. Yes, he should be here, any mom. In fact, I do believe that is him now. She rushed to the door and opened it, and in stepped one of the most impressive-looking men Sakura had ever seen. He towered over the rest of the room's occupants by several heads, and every inch of his tanned skin rippled with muscles. The bottom half of his face was hidden beneath a mess of bandages, and Sakura would have been vaguely established a similarity between Haku's master and instructor Kakashi if it were not for one small fact. The man looked like he was about ready to kill all of them. His brown eyes glistened with lethal intent as they surveyed Sakura and Sasuke with obvious disapproval. They were the eyes of a killer, the hardened eyes of a man who killed people and enjoyed doing it. Maybe Sakura was being excessively paranoid, but the giant sword sheathed across Haku's master's back did little to assuage her worry. In addition, wrapped lopsided around the man's short, spiky brown hair was a black, forehead protector like Haku's, clearly signifying him as a ninja from the hidden mist village, and thus automatically a source of great apprehension. Mr. and Mrs. Chichiro, Haku said. Meet my master, Momochi Zabuza. Sasuke offered a hand. It's a pleasure. Zabuza gave Sasuke a look that clearly said, touch me and I will kill you. Or at least that was what Sakura thought it said, and Sasuke apparently agreed because he quickly withdrew his hand and did not press the matter. Now, Zabuza, sir, let's be polite. Haku encouraged her mentor cheerfully. Zabuza's response was a different sort of glare that said, you have to be freaking kidding me, right? Sakura wondered if Zabuza spoke, or could speak for that matter. Maybe that was why he had all those bandages around his mouth. Either that or he was just another one of those enigmatic weirdos like Instructor Kakashi who elected to hide their mouths for unknown reasons. Birth deformities were the popular opinion, but until someone did something about it, the mysterious association of masked men's faces would remain hidden. Just looking at the fearsome monster of a man, Sakura thought it probably would be infinitely safer to attempt to remove Instructor Kakashi's mask than Zabuza's. Not even a suicidal fool with a death wish would probably try something so stupid. There had to be less painful ways to die, particularly since Zabuza looked like he ate little children for breakfast. Who knew? Maybe he ate grown-ups for dinner. Suddenly, Zabuza sneezed. Haku looked at him curiously for a moment but then returned her attention to her guests. We'll be meeting Mr. Gato in the morning at a bridge east of town, Haku announced. In the meantime, feel free to roam the hotel, but while you are our guests here, I must implore you to not try to leave. Sasuke stiffened. You mean we're prisoners, here, right? Haku's smile never wavered. We just enjoy your company. That is all, Mr. Chichiro. You may explore the inside of the hotel to your likings, but if I may make a suggestion, I would highly recommend getting some rest, though. Slowly, The duo retreated from the room. Right before the door closed, Haku's parting words slipped through the threshold. You'll need it. A few hours later, Tenten and Hinata had managed to tend to Asuka's wounds, and the boys were released from their temporary prison. The red-haired archer was now sitting on Kakashi's sofa, her torso heavily wrapped in clean bandages, while their instructor debriefed her. The rest of the ninjas were gathered around, either leaning against the wall like Neji or sitting on the ground. So they'll be waiting for us at the bridge with Kiba, Kakashi said, writing down the information on a notepad. One last question. What were they trading in? You told me it wasn't weapons or stolen goods. Any idea what they were dealing in? Asuka hesitated for a long moment. She bit her lip, thinking of a sensitive way to break the news, but when her creativity failed her she merely pointed at Naruto. They're after you. They're after Naruto. What? Demanded Kakashi. Naruto. Are you sure? Asuka nodded. Positive. I heard Gato say Naruto's name aloud. They're after Naruto and the... But why would they want Naruto? Hinata interrupted. She glanced questioningly at her friend. Why are they after you, Naruto? Naruto was uncharacteristically quiet. Without a clever retort or arrogant boast brimming on the edge of his lips, he suddenly seemed cold and lifeless, void of the energetic persona that defined his identity. Silence was never a word associated with the ninja branded, Konoha's #1 troublemaker, and for him not to be yelling or screaming was unsettling because it could mean only one thing. Something was terribly wrong. Naruto was never serious otherwise. He looked at his teammates, his azure eyes meeting theirs before speaking. They're not after me. They're after the Kyuubi. Kakashi looked startled. The relationship between Naruto and the Kyuubi was supposed to have been a tightly kept secret to shield the boy from the horrible truth, and according to Tsunade, Naruto was still none the wiser. However, that was obviously no longer the case. You know about the Kyuubi, Naruto? He asked calmly. Naruto nodded, his face stern. Such a grave look seemed terribly out of place on a face usually graced with a beaming smile. A chill ran down Hinata's spine just looking at him, seeing little of the Naruto she loved in the man currently standing there. Yeah, I know. How long have you known for? Since I was 5 years old. Naruto answered. Since I was old enough to realize that the villagers were afraid of me. I wanted to know why, so I started asking questions. It didn't take too long to get the full story. People in Konoha aren't that great at keeping secrets. Naruto, Hinata whispered. She wanted to say something to comfort her friend as he revisited memories that were undoubtedly painful. She remembered those days. Her father had forbidden her to talk with Naruto, the scars of the Kyuubi's rampage still fresh on the Hidden Leaf village as they tried to recoup from the loss of their Hokage. And Hinata had obeyed, never daring to talk to the container of the fearsome beast until several years had passed. In some small way, she too had contributed to the pain that Konoha had inflicted on Naruto. The blonde-haired ninja smiled at Hinata. I'm not bitter, Hinata. He assured her. As I learned more about the Kyuubi I began to understand their hatred. It was something I just learned to deal with. Kakashi nodded. He was not sure whether or not he should been impressed or concerned by Naruto's unprecedented amount of knowledge about the demonic fox manifesting inside the boy. Tsunade had underestimated Naruto if she believed he would remain blissfully ignorant of the symbiotic relationship he shared with the Kyuubi for this long. Everyone else knew. It only made sense he would know too sooner or later. In that way, the fourth Hokage's dream, his vision of a world where Naruto could grow up normally, was never meant to be. Then you also know of the Kyuubi's power, Kakashi continued, and how you unconsciously benefit from it. You mean like the supernatural healing? Naruto responded. He scratched the back of his head embarrassedly. The last time the Kyuubi lent me his power was when Sakura punched me out. She would have killed me if that stupid fox hadn't helped me out. So the fox lent Naruto his power, Kakashi realized. It was interesting that such an evil creature would share anything with anyone, but then again, the Kyuubi was not stupid. If Naruto died, then it would die too. Allowing Naruto use into its own chakra in times of danger was nothing more than an egocentric act of self-preservation. So far, the Kyuubi had limited its involvement to healing the boy when he was mortally injured, but the white-haired Junin wondered how long it would be before Naruto began tapping into its true potential. So what are we going to do? Neji asked. Kakashi stood up and stared down at his subordinates. When he spoke, his voice was serious and authoritative, not at all like the indolent tone he had been using before. Tomorrow morning we out in force, he said. Kiba will be at the bridge. And that's where we'll be too. But Instructor Kakashi, Tenten said. There's no guarantee Gato will be at the bridge too. Our mission is to capture Gato, so shouldn't we make sure he's actually going to be there before we attack? There was strong reasoning behind the markswoman's argument. If they rushed into action to save Kiba, there was a good chance Gato would escape from Kakami amidst the commotion. But if they looked for Gato instead, then Kiba would surely die when no one was waiting at the bridge. It was impossible to divide their forces and task one team to the bridge and another to find Gato. They would need a concentrated effort if they hoped to prevail against enemies of the caliber Asuka described. To Junin was no laughing, and the third party, the unknown ninja, was not to be underestimated. Their objective was to capture Gato, but at what cost? Would the blood of one of their own pay for the apprehension of the crime syndicate leader? Hinata was up on her feet in an instant, her hands balled into tiny fists. We can't just leave Kiba by himself. She yelled angrily. Neji stepped forward and placed a placating hand on his cousin's shoulder. Hinata, the mission comes first. Like hell it does. Naruto stormed as he leapt to Hinata's defense. The Hokage could send a dozen Junin if she wanted Gato that badly. Right now we should be worrying about getting our own friends back alive. Hinata beamed at her friend admirably. Neji, on the other hand, glared icily at Naruto. We were assigned a job for a reason, Naruto. It's our duty as Konoha ninjas to fulfill it no matter what the cost. Kiba knew what he was getting into when he accepted a B-rank mission. The long-haired ninja explained patiently. I'm the reason that Kiba's in trouble in the first place, shouted Naruto. Gato wants me, right? Naruto, none of this is your fault. Kakashi explained softly. I don't care, snapped Naruto. This isn't about me or the Kyuubi or the mission. This is about our friend. I don't know about you guys, but someone who abandons their allies, he shook his head, scowling darkly. Are trash. His words seemed to silence the dissenters. Even Neji did not have any rebuttal. They might not like each other all the time, they might not even all be friends. But they were from Konoha and Konoha ninjas always looked after their own. They would violate the parameters of the mission, they would go to their death in combat, but they would not abandon their fellow ninja for a pointless cause like a thug named Gato. That was their way of the ninja. Those who do not care about their companions are worse than trash. Kakashi smiled underneath his mask. Your foolishness lives on, Obito, he thought. Thank you. The day started like any other in the Hidden Leaf village of Konoha. The sun rose to its apex in the mid-afternoon sky, casting its rays on the people on Konoha as they busied themselves with their various routines. The villagers were in their fields, tending to their livestock or fields, or hard at work plying their trade in one of the many merchant kiosks that littered the ninja village. The ninjas in Konoha were equally as occupied. Konoha High, the official ninja training academy, was in full swing, its classrooms packed with ninjas cramming for their upcoming semester finals, and the certified Chunin and Junin were no less busy as they prepared to embark on important missions. There was nothing in particular to discriminate this day from the rest, no distinguishing omen that would make anyone take note of its importance. But high above the village, deep within the stone chambers of the 5th Hokage's office, a meeting of great significance was being held. In the next few minutes, a decision of unparalleled magnitude would be made, a decision that had the potential to permanently alter the future of Konoha. All the senior instructors in charge of teaching the genin had been summoned for the meeting. They were some of the finest ninjas in Konoha, men and women who had proved their bravery and skill time and again, and they were present because their counsel was invaluable to the Hokage. The instructors stood in a semi-circle around the fifth Hokage's desk at rigid attention, looks of grim severity on their faces. "You want us to teach education to the seniors?" asked Yumino Iruka, looking at the Hokage with something akin to wry skepticism on his scarred face. A tall chunin with brown hair tied in top knot, Iruka was the head of Konoha's elementary school. The busty, blonde-haired Tsunade nodded her head vigorously. "That is correct, Instructor Iruka. I believe that it is of vital importance to ensure that the future ninjas of Konoha are properly educated in this matter." "But why?" was Iruka's next question, his cynicism not belied by Tsunade's explanation. "Most of the seniors are already 17 years old. Isn't it a little late to be teaching them about?" "Better late than never," Tsunade replied. She thought this sounded exceptionally profound. In truth, she had read it from a fortune cookie during lunch, but that was something her teachers did not need to know. The Hokage rose from her desk and paced back and forth behind it. "Imagine this, if you will, Instructor Iruka. One day your students are on their first mission and an enemy ninja attempts to seduce them. What will they do?" She let the question hang in the air. When no one readily answered, she slammed her hand on the desk. "They will be unprepared to counteract such seduction. They will be a prisoner to their hormones and be defeated. And that I cannot allow. Say we do teach the seniors ed," Sarutobi Asuma commented between the burning cigarette clenched in between his teeth. "Do you think they'll really take us seriously?" The Hokage shrugged. "Of course they will. You are highly experienced, highly trained ninjas. Why wouldn't they listen to you?" Hitaki Kakashi snorted, earning him the second deadly glare from the Hokage that day. The first was for showing up an hour late for the meeting. Most men would find Tsunade's fearsome glare intimidating if not terrifying, but the silver-haired Junin seemed unperturbed by her murderous glower. "Hokage," he said, "in case you haven't noticed, all of us are single." Tsunade frowned. "You mean to say none of you have ever had before?" Her question was meant with a prolonged silence. Asuma and Yuhi Kurenai exchanged embarrassed glances. Iruka blushed and scratched his head shyly. Tsunade's assistant and head medic, Shizune, looked away, and the normally shameless Mitarashi Anko could not meet the Hokage's piercing stare. Only Kakashi did not react visibly to Tsunade's inquiry, partially because his face had disappeared behind that stupid, pink book he carried around. "That's what I thought," Tsunade declared triumphantly. But," Iruka objected, "what if we find that our experience in the subject is..." He thought hard for a long moment, trying to find the right word to fill the blank. He finally settled with, "limited." Almost instantly he regretted his choice of diction, for the Hokage's office suddenly exploded in a deafening chorus of hysterical laughter. Asuma roared heartily and slapped his comrade on the shoulder. "You mean to say you've never gotten any action?" "And no, of course I have," protested Iruka. "I bet he's still a virgin," teased the purple-haired Anko. "I'm not," yelled the Chunin, but his denials were drowned out by his fellow instructors' raucous laughter. "Maybe we should let Iruka teach the lesson on masturbation," quipped a Junin wearing a bandana and dark sunglasses. "I bet he's an expert at that." Iruka's face was a brilliant shade of scarlet. Whether it was from embarrassment or rage no one knew, or cared really. "Shut up, Ebisu." It took another several good minutes for Tsunade to regain order, though admittedly, her lack of effort might have contributed some to that. Her wooden desk was cracked from where she had been beating her fist on it in fits of unbridled laughter, and never had her ribs ached so. All right, stop teasing," she wheezed in between chuckles. "Yeah, stop teasing the virgin," cried Kurenai. It took another minute to recover from that one, and by then, tears were streaming from Tsunade's eyes. Chuckling, she wiped them away on the back of her sleeve. Seriously now, Instructor Aruka, what do you think? Aruka, still miffed at the incessant harassment at the hands of his fellow instructors, refused to answer and angry folded his arms across his chest. Teach a bunch of angst-ridden, hormone-driven adolescents about? Asked Kakashi, raising an eyebrow. This has to the worst idea of yours since you had the entire village hunt for the perfect recipe for maple syrup. What was wrong with that one? Demanded Tsunade. Konoha now makes the finest pancakes in the world. Our economy is thriving as a result. Waffles are better, chimed Shizune. The rest of her teachers looked at her oddly. What? She said. They are. French toast is clearly better, argued Asuma. Shizune looked scandalized as if Asuma had said mortally offending. Her hand slowly crept to the kunai holster strapped on her leg. Take that back, she roared. That's enough. No one is going to kill someone over French toast or waffles or pancakes or whatever. Not in my office anyway. Tsunade shouted. Once she was sure Shizune was not about to stab Asuma over his blasphemous transgressions towards the superiority of waffles, the Hokage continued. Now, I'm trusting all of you to do your best with such a sensitive topic. I suggest you think long and hard about your lesson, but I'm confident each of you will find your own unique approach. The instructors nodded, some reluctantly. Kakashi did have a point, Tsunade had to begrudgingly admit. Teenagers were troublesome, ninja teenagers even more so. How they would react to a crash course in the fundamentals of education would be interesting to say the very least. Ideally, they would handle the subject with an adult's maturity, but a more likely scenario involved widespread hysteria and more drama than an episode of the televised soap opera, Ninja Idol. High school was so awesome that way. You begin tomorrow, Tsunade bellowed. Dismissed. The teachers filed out one by one until the Hokage's office was empty. With a weary sigh, Tsunade looked out the window. Crossing the sky was a yellow bird, its cheerful song filling the peaceful air as it flew through the clouds. She smiled as she watched the small bird's progress. Suddenly, an ugly, mean-looking bird swooped down from nowhere, and the beautiful singing was shattered in an ear-splitting screech as the yellow bird disappeared into the massive jaws of the larger, predatory beast. And then there was silence. Tsunade blinked. A bloody feather, all that remained of the unfortunate, now devoured, bird, slowly floated down to the ground below. Well, that can't be good, she thought. Day 1. The day of school at Konoha High started like any other. The bell rang. The senior class filed into their respective classrooms and sat down to wait for their instructor. Some days they would only wait for a few seconds, but on days when their first class was advanced chakra control with instructor Kakashi, they could expect to idle around for anywhere from a half hour to 45 minutes before the silver-haired Junin showed up with some pathetic story to excuse his tardiness. On such days such as that, the students would study, read comic books, copy each other's homework and so on. The smokers would crack open a window and the lovers would go make out in the back of the room. Others just took the opportunity to just relax like Uchiha Sasuke. Or at least that was what he was trying to do. The pink-haired female ninja, Haruno Sakura, was not being very accommodating that way, continuing with her consistent prattle regardless of whether or not Sasuke was actually listening. Sasuke-kun, Sasuke-kun. Sakura called. Sasuke rolled his eyes. Sakura, why do you call me Sasuke-kun? Because we're friends, Sasuke-kun, Sakura explained. I know that, Sakura, Sasuke said patiently. I've known you for like 13 years now. It's pretty obvious we're friends, so why the added endearment every single time you call my name? Isn't it a little redundant? No. Well, yes, maybe, she shrugged. I don't know. Should I call you, my friend, Sasuke, or, Sasuke, my friend, whenever I address you then instead of, Sasuke-kun? Sasuke sighed in resignation. He sometimes wished a giant weight would fall from the sky and crush him flat, anything to save him from such mundane conversation. He liked Sakura in a sort of quasi-platonic fashion, but sometimes the pink-haired ninja grinded his nerves with her incessant talking and fangirlish mannerism. In all modesty, Sasuke knew he was like a miniature god to the girls of Konoha High. He never asked to be. That was just the way it was, but his legion of worshippers got damn annoying after about 5 seconds. Don't be ridiculous, Sakura. What normal person here actually utilizes suffixes in names anyway? The door to the classroom was suddenly thrown open, and in sped a certain blonde-haired ninja wearing an orange tracksuit. He leapt over the first row of desks, somersaulted in the air, and landed on Sakura's desk. Sakura shrieked in surprise and promptly decked the ninja, knocking him back on the ground. Sakura-chan, Naruto whined. Why did you do that? Sakura gasped and pointed at Naruto. See, he used a suffix too. What? Naruto asked, wondering what the hell was going on. He spotted Sasuke sitting at the desk beside Sakura. As usual, he was in that too cool for you pose that Naruto suspected the young Uchiha practiced in front of a mirror for hours. Oh, it's Sasuke Tem. God, I hate you people, Sasuke muttered. So where is the instructor anyway? Naruto wondered as he sat down next to Sasuke. He was late as always, but this time there was no instructor waiting to give him a tardy. What class this was he was unsure of. He had long since lost his schedule. All he knew was that he was in the same classes as Sakura on Tuesdays, so he stuck to stalking her around campus much to the pink-haired ninja's frustration. Sakura was unsure. I heard we're having a special class first period. Something different anyway. Naruto looked about as interested as he ever did about something that concerned academics. He quickly decided to do something he found more productive, like flicking rubber bands at people across the classroom. Another sigh escaped Sasuke's lips. He wondered why he was stuck in the same classroom as an idiot like Naruto. Surely someone of Sasuke's prodigious skill was on a higher level of learning than a guy who could barely perform some of the most basic ninja techniques. Naruto was the epitome of failure in Sasuke's book. He was lazy, clumsy, and never took anything seriously. Coincidentally enough, these were all things that Sasuke could not stand. Suddenly, the door opened again, slowly this time, a loud creak echoing in the room as its rusty hinges squeaked. The class froze and in-stepped. The moment Mitarashi Anko entered the room, the atmosphere changed with swiftness that only a class full of ninjas was capable of. Cigarettes were tossed out windows, homework was hastily stuffed out of sight, and 18 ninjas teleported into their seats before their instructor closed the door behind her. It was a remarkable feat, executed with speed and precision that hinted at the limitless potential the students of Konoha High possessed. It was a shame hardly any of them ever bothered to exercise it, though. A few of the seniors could easily become the next generation of Junin if they tried hard enough, and maybe even a future Hokage lurked amidst this group of seniors, but judging from the laziness so common in the majority of the lot, most would be lucky if they even graduated from high school. Naruto watched Anko march up to the front of the classroom. She wore a tan overcoat and, underneath, a fishnet shirt, her normal choice of attire over the traditional blue jumpsuit and green flak vest typical to Junin-ranked ninjas. That was entirely like Anko, however, to forego tradition in favor of personal preference. Always rebellious and hot-headed, it was common knowledge that the purple-haired Junin regularly argued with the Hokage about everything from the school's teaching curriculum to the amount of blueberries in the blueberry muffins served at lunch. Naruto admired Anko for this. If the Junin weren't going to regulate something important like the standard of the cafeteria's blueberry muffins, then who would? Anko stopped in front of the blackboard. Grabbing a piece of chalk from the tray, she scribbled the words, Ed, on it in big bold letters, and then tossed the chalk aside. She slammed her hands hard on the front row of desks, and grinned menacingly at her class. Seniors, she said, today we're going to learn about No one said anything at first as no one was quite sure how to react to their instructor's unexpected announcement. A few of the genin chuckled nervously as if Anko had just made a joke, but there was nothing humorous about the wolfish gleam in her eyes. Anko was dead serious. This realization quickly dawned on the class, and the laughter died away, leaving only a stony silence residing in the classroom. Instructor Anko, Sasuke asked, raising his hand. Why? Anko smirked. Why, Uchiha Sasuke? What will you do one day when someone attempts to seduce one dark knight? How will you resist their amorous advances? She rounded on the raven-haired genin and pressed her face into his. What will you do, Sasuke? Sasuke blinked. What the hell does that have to do with Ed? The purple-haired instructor paused and rubbed her chin thoughtfully. What did that have to do with Ed? It was a very good question. Anko wondered why she had not brought it up when Tsunade answered the same, why? Question the day prior. The Hokage's logic made sense yesterday, but suddenly the relevancy between seduction and responsible UAL activity seemed rather remote if not completely non-existent. Anko would have to speak with the Hokage about that later on. Trust me, Sasuke, Anko answered. It does. More than you know, it does. Before Sasuke could demand a better explanation, she turned her attention to the rest of the classroom. Now, the Hokage has asked me to present a lesson on education in order to teach you youngsters how to handle your raging hormones appropriately. Another pause. Anko looked at her students. None of you girls are pregnant, are you? The female population of the senior class shook their heads. Terrific. Anko said happily. Now moving on the lesson. While Anko busied herself with a suitcase full of papers she had brought with her, Sakura turned to Sasuke and whispered, Sasuke-kun, isn't this so exciting? Sasuke gritted his teeth in annoyance. Damn those stupid suffixes and honorifics. How they vexed him so. Sakura, please stop calling me Sasuke-kun. Naruto leaned over and scowled at Sasuke. Quiet, Sasuke-tem, you baka. Sakura-chan can call you whatever she wants. Sasuke moaned in quiet despair. Stupid suffixes, stupid Japanese dialect in an English fanfiction, stupid Naruto. Why did fate torture him so? Was it not enough that his brother, Itachi, had murdered his entire clan? No, sticking him in a classroom full of linguistically incorrect retards was just a kick in the nuts, God's way of saying, I understand you know I hate you already, Sasuke, but I just thought I'd make sure. Now class, Anko said. For this lesson I'm going to help you come to terms with your feelings for that special someone, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. So here's what I want you to do. I want you write a short poem describing your feelings for this person. Think you can do this? Ask a group of kindergartners the same question and it would have probably been a prompt, yes, followed by a flurry of activity as they hurried to obey their teacher. Little kids could process simple requests like that easier than teenagers, because teenagers just love to whine and bitch about everything. As anticipated, almost instantly her request was met with a barrage of the most inane complaints from the senior year. What if I don't like someone? What if they're here? It would be embarrassing. Guy-sensei tells me that my emotions are the ripening of the springtime of youth. I'm hungry. I need to go pee. Anko felt a sudden urge to hurl a handful of shurikens into the crowd of griping students, musing that perhaps the sight of blood would quell the powerful anger building within her. However, she restrained herself from murdering her students for the moment. She imagined the Hokage would be even less understanding than the time Anko had made a particularly surly and insubordinate boy march into the infamous forest of death and then left him there unsupervised. The kid was lucky. He only had a few broken bones and a bad case of dysentery by the time a team of Chunin extracted him. Anko thought it was hilarious, but Tsunade had not been the least bit pleased. Just do it, Anko screamed. Fortunately for her, the students seemed to have grown weary of complaining and began to write, though, suffice to say, not without liberal amounts of grumbling. Naruto stared blankly at his paper and chewed on the end of his pencil. He could not begin to think of anything to write. He was a freaking ninja. Not some lame author. Only dorks did stuff like that. Imagine people actually writing for fun. The idea was laughable. But if he did not come up with something, then Anko would not be happy, and the thought of an unhappy Anko was scary to say the least. He looked around and saw that everyone else was busy diligently scribbling away at their papers. Who do I like? He thought. The obvious answer was Sakura, but how could he express his innermost feelings for the pink-haired ninja without embarrassing either her or himself? He could stick with a simple, "I love you," but that seemed too cliché and not special enough for someone like Sakura. Naruto scratched his head contemplatively, and as he did, he caught sight of Sakura. She was leaning over her paper, her pencil scratching furiously at her paper and merriment sparkling in her pretty green eyes. The blonde-haired ninja frowned darkly. It didn't take a genius to figure out who Sakura was writing about. Who else inspired so much happiness in her? Sasuke. Naruto's internal persona snarled angrily. How he detested the Uchiha and his perfection. The thought of how much he hated Sasuke was like fuel to Naruto's creative engine, stoking the flames of his innovative genius. He knew exactly what to write now. Grabbing his pencil, the trouble-making ninja began to write. His confession of love for Sakura would be so awesome that not even Sasuke could hope to top it. Time. Anko yelled. Now who wants to read their paper to the class? Unsurprisingly, no one volunteered. Anko smiled wickedly, her eyes perusing the classroom not unlike a snake searching for the tastiest morsel in a classroom full of mice. The tension was so thick it was almost palatable, the fear and nervousness almost a physical presence in the room. She loved it, savored it, delighted in it, drawing a sort of sadistic pleasure from watching her students squirm in their seats. No one wanted to publicly announce their affection for another student in front of the rest of their peers. It would be mortifying, and that was exactly why Anko was doing it. Haruno Sakura, Anko finally said, her gaze falling on the pink-haired ninja. How about you? Sakura nodded and hesitantly stood up. Her voice shaking, she began to read. With your onyx eyes so bright and bold. And your beautiful face that will never grow old. With your brilliant mind that puts all to shame. And the Sharingan bloodline that few others can claim. For 1 second with you I would fly to the moon. I love you so, Sasuke-kun. Upon finishing, she anxiously glanced around the room, ready to make a dash for the door if anyone laughed, but she needed not fear. Almost the entire class applauded appreciatively for Sakura's poem. The only ones who did not seem impressed by her creativity were Naruto, Sasuke, and instructor Anko. Naruto was glaring at Sasuke hatefully. Sasuke was busy muttering something about stupid suffixes, and Anko was looking at Sakura with something akin to utter revulsion. After Sakura had returned to her seat, instructor Anko sauntered over and casually leaned across her student's desk. So tell me, Sakura. You like Sasuke, no? Sakura blushed deeply and shot a shy glance at Sasuke who, naturally, was not paying any attention. She nodded. Yes. Why do you like him so much? It was an easy question for Sakura since she had long since established a huge list of reasons why she had committed her undying affection for the young Uchiha. She began going through the list, ticking off each entry on her fingers as she recited them. Well, he's brave, and he's handsome, and he's smart, and he's talented, and he's so super cool, and he's wrong. Instructor Anko screamed angrily. Sakura froze in mid-sentence, and the entire class stared at their teacher in surprise. The instructor slammed her palms on Sakura's desk, causing the startled young girl to jump, and then began shouting in Sakura's face. You think you love him? Huh, you think he's cool, and smart, and handsome, do you? Well, you're wrong. You're all wrong. Instructor Anko, Sakura whispered tentatively, tears forming in her eyes. Anko, however, was too far gone in her own realm of private insanity and was deafened to her terrified student's plaintive calling. Her face red with rage, the purple-haired teacher continued to assail the poor girl with her hysterical tirade. The next thing you know, he's going to take you into the woods and tell you you're special. And then he's going to take advantage of you, make you feel like he loves you, and then he'll betray you. He'll brand you and then rip out your heat and crush it beneath his feet. He'll take your trust and exploit it, and make you look like an idiot for ever falling in love with him. That's what he's going to do. The entire class exchanged, what the hell, looks with one another, the sort of perplexed expression reserved for impossibly complicated lessons and deranged teachers. It was unnerving how frequently they used this expression for the latter reason around Konoha High. Love, ha, don't make me sick, Anko shrieked, saliva dripping from her lips as her outburst continued. You can't ever trust men. Those sick bastards are snakes. Snakes, I tell you. Instructor Anko, Sakura attempted once again. This is no longer about me, is it? Anko finally seemed to settle down. Fatigued, the purple-haired instructor sat back down and caught her breath. Sorry about that, class. She muttered. Good job, Sakura. Who should go next? Naruto eagerly jumped to his feet. I'll go, he announced. Before Instructor Anko could do the logical thing and tell him to shut up and sit down, the blonde-haired ninja began to read his poem. Dearest Sakura-chan, you make me sad. Why do you like Sasuke-tem? Are you mad? There's nothing great about him, he's not even nice. In fact, I hear he's queer, like pink fuzzy dice. I want to eat ramen with you, Sakura, but you say no way. Because you're obsessively in love with a dude who is gay. So screw Uchiha Sasuke, he makes me sick. I hope he rots in hell, that dirty, stupid prick. Naruto looked up expectantly. So what do you think? He never even saw Sakura's punch coming. 1 second he was standing, paper in hand, and the next he was flying almost comically through the air. Students screamed in alarm and dived out of the trajectory of the human projectile. Naruto crashed into the back row desks, knocking them askew as he rolled across the ground. Groaning painfully, the troublemaking ninja sat up, blood dribbling from his nose. Ouch! Sasuke-chan, why did you do that? Naruto whined. Because you made fun of Sasuke-kun, you asshole. Sakura screamed. She turned to the raven-haired Uchiha sitting beside her. I'm so sorry, Sasuke-kun. Naruto is a baka. I'm sure you didn't take it seriously. Sasuke pulled at his hair and grinded his teeth in frustration. Christ. Will you people quit it with the suffixes and the Japanese? Nani? Queried Sakura. I don't even know what that means. Sasuke shouted. I don't speak Japanese. I speak English. See. Look. English. Am I going to have to go buy some freaking subtitles or something so I can hold a conversation around here? Sakura bit her lip. She had never meant to offend Sasuke with her periodic usage of Japanese in English dialogue. It had always been a habitual thing, a force of habit more than any vain desire to infuse a sense of profoundness in her words. Right then and there she vowed to stop mixing English and Japanese together, if only to preserve the sanity of her crush. Speak Japanese when speaking Japanese and English when speaking English. Gomen, Sasuke-kun. Sakura whispered before she could stop herself. God damn it. I did it again, didn't I? Hi. You did, Sakura-chan. Naruto said as he sat back down at his seat. He looked more or less like new, making Sakura vaguely wonder how he had managed to heal his bloody nose so quickly. Sasuke banged his head on the desk. God. I hate you people. So we've heard, replied Naruto. Instructor Anko cleared her throat loudly, no doubt annoyed by the interruption. Naruto was not sure why she would be upset. It wasn't as if there had been any semblance of coherency during the entire class. Sasuke's temper tantrum about suffixes was just another disturbance in the entire chaotic mess that Anko liked to call a lesson. A quick survey of the classroom told Naruto that half the class was asleep, a quarter was doing homework or chatting, and one particularly amorous couple was making out frivolously in the back of the classroom again, adding a nice spin of irony to their ed lesson. All in all, everyone but Anko seemed happy right now. Unknown to Naruto, however, there was one other person who was not happy with the way the class was going. It wasn't that she was unhappy, per se, but Hyuga Hinata was definitely not content at the moment. Her small body twitched every time someone spoke, and she kept switching her gaze back and forth between the paper on her desk and Naruto, who was sitting across the class. Inuzuka Kiba, who sat beside Hinata, took note of his friend's strange behavior and wrinkled his eyebrow curiously. "What's the matter with you, Hinata?" Kiba asked. "I can smell your fear." "Why you what, Kiba?" Hinata stammered. "Your fear. I can smell it. Like a dog can smell fear." "Same idea." Hinata gave him a weird look. "That's kind of gross, Kiba." She wanted this conversation to change topics, and fast. The last thing she wanted was Kiba hounding her about why she was nervous, because she knew her transparent nature would quickly reveal the source of her anxiety, namely the piece of paper on her desk. She wanted to destroy it, burn it, tear it, whatever, but she was afraid Instructor Anko would spot her. On the other hand, she was equally as terrified at the prospect that she might be called on to read her poem, a poem that unfortunately contained her truest, most passionate feelings for Naruto. Hinata had no idea why she had chosen to write it in school when she barely trusted her own private diary with such personal information, but before she knew it, the deed was done, and now she was in trouble. If Anko called on her, she would have no choice but to read it, and then what? Would Naruto be happy? Would he be sad? Would he love her or hate her? "Thank you, Naruto, for that tasteless piece of poetry," Anko snorted. "Now who else wants to go? Please don't call on me, please don't call on me," Hinata silently begged. "Please don't call on me." The purple-haired Junin searched the classroom for her next victim. Hinata slithered her body down underneath her desk so that only her head peeked above the table's surface. Maybe Anko wouldn't see her through her ingenious ninja concealment skills. "Hyuga Hinata, why don't you go next?" Hinata tried to be a cheerful person. She liked to always see the best in situations no matter how unfavorable they may seem, but sometimes it felt near impossible to remain optimistic when faced with the adversities so common in her life. She was the eldest but least loved of her father's children. Her cousin, Neji, was a genius and made her look even worse, and her little sister was proving to be a better ninja than Hinata ever had. These problems were trivial in Hinata's mind, obstacles in life that she had long grown accustomed to and could now shrug off without worry. It was the screwballs, those unprecedented surprises that life tossed her way that really bothered her. Screwballs like fainting in the middle of Instructor Anko's ed class. She barely even remembered it, but the brutal teasing at the hands of her friends, Sakura and Ino, more than made up for Hinata's lapse in memory. Anko had picked Hinata to read her poem. Hinata stood up, and then suddenly there was darkness. Hinata had awoken several hours later in bed, safe in her own room on her family's gigantic estate. Apparently, she had passed out, was rushed to the hospital wing, and then within minutes, released into the care of her family's private physician. From there, her servants had brought the unconscious Hyuga back to the mansion where she had been thoroughly examined. There was no major injury, the physician concluded after poking and prodding Hinata for an hour. She was in good health. Hiyashi Hyuga, Hinata's father, had frowned at the news, almost as if displeased that his daughter was in no mortal peril. But that was only typical really. If she were to faint in the middle of a normal school day, there had better be a damn good reason for it. And since there wasn't, It only proved to reinforce the idea in her father's mind that Hinata was indeed the weakest and most inferior of the clan. Look on the bright side, Hinata consoled herself. At least Instructor Anko didn't make me read my poem. She smiled, bittersweet relief settling over her as she sat down on her bed. On one hand, she was ecstatic that she had maneuvered her way out of such a sticky situation, but on the other, her poem had been quite nice and it was a shame that Naruto would never see it. Hinata pulled her book bag onto her lap and began rummaging through its contents, searching through it for the paper on which she had written the poem. It captured her most devout, passionate feelings for Konoha High's resident troublemaker, and Hinata wanted to read it just one more time before she burned it. It was a tragedy that something so precious would have to be destroyed, but in light of the near catastrophe that afternoon, there really was no other option. Hinata's hands dug deep through her bag, feeling their way past the heavy, meticulously kept binders that housed her class work. Her school bag was always very organized so that no loose papers littered its interior. Having fainted before she could properly file it away, the poem would be the only paper not committed to her plastic archives, the anomaly that needed to be purged in order to maintain the integrity of the pristine society her bag entertained. Only the paper was not there. An unpleasantly cold chill descended down Hinata's spine as if someone had poured an icy glass of water down the back of her shirt. She took a deep breath, hoping that an influx of fresh oxygen would regulate the rapid beating that had begun pounding deep within her chest, and forced herself to calmly sift through the book bag again. No poem was to be found. This time Hinata did not bother with any pretense of composure. With a strangled squeal, she dove into her bag, haphazardly tossing binders across the room as she searched frantically for the lost poem. Her heavy history binder sailed through the air and crashed into the far wall in a rainstorm of papers, the healing technique notes she had labored hours over tossed carelessly aside. The poem, where was that poem? Panicking, the eldest of the Hyuga heirs pushed her bag off her bed and sprinted out of her room. She met Neji in the hallway as he emerged from the bathroom. Clad only in a towel wrapped around his waist and a toothbrush in his mouth, her older cousin blinked in confusion as Hinata rounded on him. Neji, she yelled. The servants told me one of my friends brought my school stuff by. Who brought my books to the estate? Neji thought for a minute, brushing his teeth idly before answering around a mouthful of toothpaste. What was his name again? You know, that loud-mouthed idiot in our class. Naruto delivered my books, gasped Hinata, clasping her hands over her mouth in horror. No, the other loud-mouthed idiot. Kiba. Neji nodded. Yeah, that's the one. Thank you, Neji, Hinata said gratefully. Without wasting another second, she raced back towards her bedroom door. Oh, and your dad is furious with him. Neji called after Hinata. His dog pissed all over the new flowers and now the entrance smells like. But Hinata did not wait to hear the rest of what Neji had to say. She slammed her door shut and dove for the cordless phone sitting on her desk. Snatching it up, she hurriedly dialed in the number for the Inuzuka home. The phone rang a few times before someone picked up. Fortunately, it was Kiba. Hinata was not in the mood to endure another of Kiba's sister's taunting inquisitions as to whether or not Hinata was her little brother's new girlfriend. Kiba speaking, Kiba answered. Kiba, Hinata said urgently. Did you take that piece of paper on my desk after I fainted? Oh hey, Hinata. You're feeling better, I take it. Perfect. Now do you have that paper? A moment of silence lapsed between the two ninjas as Kiba contemplated Hinata's question. Oh, the one that had Naruto's name scribbled on the back. Yeah, I took it. Hinata was not sure whether or not to sigh in relief or swear. If Kiba had it, then the chances of Naruto accidentally seeing it were minimal as Kiba would promptly lose the poem or one of his dogs would eat it. But still, if Kiba read it, then she would most likely have to endure a month's worth of teasing at the hands of the Inuzuka wolf trainer. Did you read it? Huh, no. Kiba replied. I wouldn't want to read a poem of Naruto's. Kiba, Hinata explained patiently. That wasn't Naruto's poem. That was mine. Wait, what? Your poem? Then why was Naruto's name on it? I borrowed a piece of paper from him a couple days ago, she lied. He must have written it on the back or something. Hinata could hardly believe her luck. Losing the poem was a momentary setback, but now that Kiba had it in its unread entirety, it would be back within her possession in no time. Things were finally going her way. Really? Well, I don't know how to break this to you, Hinata, and I know you're going to be mad, but. But what? Kiba, Hinata demanded. Her hand clutched around the phone, cracking its plastic shell as her fingers tightened harder and harder around it like a vice. Fear rose up in her chest, the warm relief she had been harboring extinguished in a deluge of dread. But what? Well, I saw Naruto's name on it, so I kind of gave it to him. You what? Screamed Hinata into the phone. It had his name on it. I thought it was his. Kiba replied defensively. There was an opinion propagated around Konoha High about Hinata's personality that portrayed her as an innocent, timid and nice girl that seldom voiced her true feelings. That was what most people thought, those who did not know Hinata very well anyway. Kiba had known Hinata since kindergarten, and he knew there was another very different alter ego residing beneath her placid exterior. She was normally kind, warm, and reserved, but in extreme circumstances, when her schizophrenic persona emerged, well. I'm going to freaking kill you. Hinata yelled. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not even a year from now, but I guarantee you, Inuzuka Kiba, I'm going to murder you. Hinata, calm down. Calm down, she scoffed. Calm down. She lost track of how long she bombarded the poor Inuzuka boy with graphically detailed threats of all the ways she envisioned killing him. Hinata often surprised herself at how vulgar and her inner self could be. In the past, she would never have thought she even would contemplate some of the more profane and explicit methods of execution she described to Kiba. They just rolled off her tongue, as if she had been unconsciously storing them away for years now in the deepest annals of her memory, just waiting for some unfortunate soul to unleash it all on. At some point or the other, Hinata paused long enough to realize that Kiba had hung up and that she was now screaming incoherently at an unresponsive dial tone. With a snarl of rage, Hinata threw the phone across the room, not caring where it landed, and flung herself on her bed. She sobbed miserably, hating the world and the cruel tricks it played on her, and then rolled over so that her silver eyes could stare forlornly at her ceiling. What would she do? Oh, what would she do? First fainting in the middle of class and now this. Naruto was probably already ashamed of her for being so weak, and after he read her poem, there would be no doubt in his mind that Hinata was just another silly, stupid girl that was not worthy of his time or interest. God, you hate me, don't you? She groaned. The deafening silence that met her question, Hinata felt, was answer enough. Uzumaki Naruto had lived in the dorms ever since he started high school. Having no parents to call his own, it was an easy decision to embrace the privilege of independent living offered to all graduated genin. While he had many fond memories from his time living under the guardianship of instructor Iruka, the desire to be released from the restraining shackles of adult supervision far superseded any inclination to do otherwise. In the dorms, no one complained about what Naruto ate, when he should do his homework, or how late he stayed out sneaking around the ninja village with his friends. The newfound freedom was great. Well, most of the time anyway. On the flip side, no one was there to cook him dinner, wash his laundry, or clean his dishes either. Instructor Iruka had always been very effective in those tasks, so effective that Naruto teased him that he would make a good wife one of these days. He called his room a bachelor's pad, a man's sanctuary devoid of a woman's touch. Translated, this meant the dorm was a dump, because indeed no woman would have been able to endure the mess. Dirty laundry littered the floor and was draped carelessly over the room's sparse furnishings, and empty ramen cups, candy wrappers, and an assorted library of comics, school books, and dirty magazines were tossed messily about. Naruto seldom cleaned up. Only when the rancid odor from the rotting garbage became unbearable or when Naruto realized he no longer had any clean clothing did he bother to tidy up his dorm. The blonde-haired ninja strolled into the room, slamming the door shut behind him and tossing his bag onto a huge pile of laundry in the center of the dorm. Supposedly his futon was hidden beneath it all, but it had been over a month since he had seen it last. Kicking stray soda cans and instant noodle packages out of his way, Naruto walked over to the refrigerator unit in the corner and opened it. Almost immediately, a disgusting stench assaulted the young ninja, and hastily Naruto slammed the door shut again. The milk had expired again. Naruto made a mental note to go grocery shopping soon. He could only leech off his friend and next-door neighbor, Kyo, for so long. Besides, he drank skim milk. Disgusting. He reached into his pocket, searching for a marker so he could write himself a reminder, but instead of a marker, his hands came across something else, a piece of paper. Curious, Naruto pulled it out. It was folded and his name was written on the back. Oh yeah, he muttered to himself. Kiba thought this was mine. Obviously it wasn't though. Naruto rarely wrote any of his school work down today, during Instructor Anko's class, had been a rare exception. He shrugged. The paper was of no importance to him. He might as well just throw it away. Naruto looked for the garbage can and located it buried underneath a heap of week-old newspapers and juice cartons. A frown crossed the young ninja's face. It would be too bothersome to clear away all the junk just so he could throw away one piece of paper. Instead, with a flick of his wrist, Naruto flung the paper onto the kitchen table. Maybe if he was bored he would read it later, but now he had more important things to do. He glanced at his watch and grinned. It was 6 o'clock, better known to Naruto and his friends as shower hour. It was the most common time for the dorm's female population to use the building's communal bath, and subsequently, was the best opportunity to use the convenient peeking hole in the wall that Naruto had made 2 years earlier. A dozen dirty thoughts dancing through the perverted ninja's mind, Naruto ran back out the door, the folded piece of paper forgotten. Haku was silent in the presence of her master, though it was not from a lack of anything to say. She very much desired to speak, but she realized that anything she might have to say, no matter how tastefully worded, would undoubtedly be correctly interpreted as nothing short of gross disrespect. Haku did not want to appear disrespectful, or worse, defiant, in the eyes of her superior. However, contrary to what one might assume, this display of courtesy was not forced nor inspired by fear of her master. No, she was respectful because she wanted to, because her master deserved it. Momochi Zabuza was a great man, a figure of unparalleled veneration in Haku's eyes. And that was why Haku chose not to speak. Instead, she twirled one of her thin, throwing needles back and forth between her pale fingers with an idle sort of complacent disinterest. Anything to hold her interest and keep her in check. A single mistake would have rent open her flesh from the needle's razor-sharp point, but never once did she pay heed to it as it danced through her hand. You disagree with my decision, Haku? Zabuza asked. He was reclining against an empty cage in the middle of the room, an empty cage that had previously housed their prisoners, a Konoha ninja and his dog. It's not my place to agree or disagree, Master Zabuza. Haku said pleasantly. Zabuza smirked. It was hard to tell what Haku was thinking with her unwavering amiable personality. He couldn't even remember the last time the girl had so much as frowned, much less sound annoyed or angry. I know you want to say something, Haku. Go ahead. Haku hesitated. Just because someone gave you permission to be rude didn't mean it was the right thing to do. But in this case, she would make an exception. You just let those Konoha spies walk away with our prisoners. Indeed I did. confirmed Zabuza. Now that the Konoha team has all their members, they will have no reason to go to the bridge with the Kyuubi. This, in turn, will void the agreement made between Gato and his business partner. True. Please, continue, Haku. Conclusively, this will terminate our contract with Gato along with any promises of payment for our services. Again, correct. Haku thought long and hard before she spoke the next word. She had hoped by clarifying their rather precarious, present situation would reveal the folly in her master's planning, but judging from Zabuza's relaxed posture, nothing was amiss. That could only mean Zabuza was planning something contrary to their original objectives, and it bothered Haku somewhat that he had not elected to share this with her. Normally Zabuza never hid anything from her. Surely it was not a matter of a lack of trust. After all, it had been Haku who had discovered the Konoha spies in Kakami, and it had been her who had lured the Mr. and Mrs. Chichiro to their safe house under the pretense of leading them to Gato. Of course, back then, the expectation had been that Zabuza would take them prisoner, not allow them to free the prisoner that Gato had somehow managed to take hostage on his own. One thing Haku did know was that Gato was unaware of this recent turn of events. For all she knew, he was still barricaded in his private house on the south side of town, waiting in terror for the next meeting with his secret business partner, completely oblivious to the fact that, barring a miracle, the Kyuubi would not be there to barter with. Chances were, once the business partner found out Gato had reneged on the deal, the fat crime lord would not have too much longer to live. Not that this bothered Haku a great deal. She thought he was a jackass anyway. So what was Zabuza thinking? Why? Haku asked. It's complicated, responded Zabuza after a moment. But it has everything to do with this team that Konoha has sent to Kakami. They're here to apprehend Gato. Haku pointed out. Our current actions aren't entirely in keeping with protecting him from this threat. Zabuza snorted. They can have Gato for all I care. I was going to kill him anyhow once we were done. When did you decide this? About 5 minutes after I agreed to work for him. Haku's smile broadened. The idea of betraying and murdering Gato appealed to her somehow. She had no liking for the fat gangster, low-life scum like him that preyed on the weaknesses of others disgusted her. Killing him would be a blessing. Then what is this all about, Master Zabuza? Zabuza reached towards where his sword was propped up against the wall and quietly slid it across his back. It's time for you to leave, Haku. Haku froze in place. Her throat clenched, and her next words came out as a hoarse whisper. What? I want you to leave, Haku. Your business here is done. Get out of the city and meet me back in Rock Country. Why? Haku asked. What's going on? If everything is going the way I think it is, an old acquaintance of mine will be waiting for me at the bridge soon. I'm going to kill him. Zabuza explained. Haku began to speak, but he cut her off with a harsh glare. This is a private matter, Haku. Now leave. I can help you, pleaded Haku. Please let me come. Zabuza shook his head vehemently. You're a powerful ninja, Haku, but even you wouldn't stand a chance against the man I'm meeting. Haku sincerely doubted that. In all modesty, she knew she was more skilled than most ninjas. How many others had earned the privilege of being an S-ranked criminal? There was thousands of B-ranked and hundreds of A-ranked thugs, but only a handful of S-ranked renegade ninjas were still out there. And Haku was one of them. How strong did a ninja have to be that Zabuza would doubt her ability to even lending a helping hand? Who is he? Haku asked. A former ally of mine, now rival and enemy, Zabuza answered. He walked toward the door leading out of their safe house, paused in the doorway, and looked back at his apprentice. Konoha's legendary assassin, Hitaki Kakashi. You're sure his name was Zabuza? Kakashi asked Sasuke. The younger ninja nodded. He seemed surprisingly alert seeing as that he and Sakura had probably not slept in over a day now. Perhaps Kakashi had underestimated the two. They were certainly proving to be more resourceful than he had expected. Much to everyone's surprise and relief, the duo had arrived at the safe house earlier that morning with a wounded Kiba and Akamaru in tow. After the girls patched up their injured comrades, Kakashi had sat down to debrief Sasuke and Sakura. Suffice to say, the news of two renegade Junin on the scene drastically changed things, a rather anticlimactic follow-up from the night before. Still, Kakashi had long grown accustomed to last-minute changes. On missions like these, the only certainty was uncertainty. Afterwards, the team had moved out, closing up the safe house and relocating to a grassy hill a mile or so away from their new destination, the bridge. There, they had set up a new base of operations, a primitive one with only a blanket serving as a makeshift tent for their sleeping accommodations. Not that they would be sleeping very much. In fact, if they played their cards right and Lady Luck was on their side, today could be their last day in Kakami. What are you up to? Kakashi muttered to no one in particular, reaching into his backpack for a pair of binoculars. Kakashi peered through the binoculars at the bridge below. From his team's vantage point, he had a clear view of the convex stretch of concrete that passed over a large river and linked the northern and southern ends of the city together. There was something peculiar afoot, however. A dense fog had settled over the bridge, enveloping it in an obscuring cloud of mist. Even the Hyuga clan's Byakugan had failed to penetrate it, leading Kakashi to suspect that the fog was not entirely natural. It was a little too coincidental that the fog provided perfect concealment for an ambush, and Kakashi knew a skilled ninja like Zabuza would have no trouble manipulating water-based elements to create such an effect. Some of what he knew about the renegade ninja came from the bingo book he used to carry as an Anbu agent. The important kind of stuff about Zabuza. For instance, he was a psychopathic murderer who had tried to kill his own people. That kind of thing. The bridge was void of pedestrians, strange for the early morning where hawkers and merchants would use the bridge to commute to work. While Kakashi was pleased they would not need to worry about civilians, he had a grim notion that the empty bridge was more than just a fortuitous coincidence. How many people had to die to ensure that the bridge was unoccupied? Zabuza would have no reservations about murdering civilians if he needed to. He betrayed his own village, killed his fellow comrades, attempted to assassinate his own leader. The blood of the innocent meant nothing to him. The silver-haired Junin returned the binoculars to his rucksack and stealthily moved backwards into the forest where the genin were waiting for him. He motioned for them to come closer, and then in a barely audible whisper, told his students what he had seen. A trap? Sasuke asked. More than likely, replied Kakashi. If it is, Zabuza will be waiting for us to come down there. Maybe Haku too. Naruto eagerly poked his head over Sasuke's shoulder, grinning excitedly. Two of them against all of us? Let's go get them, he said. Sasuke scowled at his comrade's incompetence. Kakashi humored Naruto with a small smile as if regarding a particularly slow child who was too stupid to know any better. Not that he thought Naruto was exceptionally dumb. Contrary, Kakashi knew Naruto was quite clever and adept at acquiring new skills, but his over-exuberance and spontaneous personality averaged him out as being only semi-competent at best. In other words, Naruto would become a great ninja one of these days if his natural stupidity didn't kill him first. They're S-ranked criminals, Naruto. He explained gently. They're out of your league. But I think I could still. You should worry about Gato for now, Kakashi continued, interrupting Naruto. He won't be on the bridge since they don't have Kiba for leverage, so chances are he's in hiding and his bodyguards are there waiting for you to show up. Us? Asked Sakura. You're not coming with us, Instructor Kakashi. Kakashi seemed not to hear Sakura. He turned to where Kiba, Akamaru, and Asuka were resting. I want you two to get back to Konoha and request reinforcements from the Hokage. Think you can make it? Asuka nodded. I'll make sure Kiba gets there in one piece, Instructor. Kiba glared daggers at his teammate, but was too weary from his wounds to formulate something scathing enough to shoot back. Check around town for clues for where Gato might be, Kakashi instructed his students. Kiba and Asuka found him easily enough the first time, and I don't think he's gotten any smarter since then. Shadow him as long as possible, and if you feel confident enough, move in to apprehend the target. But Instructor Kakashi, Sakura objected. She raised her hand involuntarily like she was sitting in the white-haired Junin's class back in Konoha, and demanded, "What about you?" Kakashi looked out into the distance thoughtfully and said, "I'm going to pick a fight." "What?" exclaimed Naruto loudly. "What about them being S-ranked criminals and all that? Or what about the mission?" inquired Neji quietly. "Now that we've rescued Kiba and Akamaru, shouldn't we worry more about completing our job?" "Mission just changed," Kakashi answered dismissively. "I'm going to engage the enemy on the bridge." "But," Sakura stammered, "what if the rest of you continue with your mission?" their teacher told them. "I'll meet up with you later." As always, Naruto had something to say about this. He had a comment for anything, and it seemed he thought it a crime to leave it unvoiced. "You're abandoning your team so you can go fight with this Zabuza guy," he stated plainly. "Why is it so important to you to fight him? It's every ninja's job to apprehend criminals," Kakashi said simply. It was an empty excuse. Even Kakashi realized how insincere it sounded. But the truth would upset the genin. They were, after all, still children and not ready to confront the harsh realities of what it meant to be a ninja. These kinds of hard lessons would be ones they would learn on their own when they were ready. "Good luck everyone," he said, and with that, he rose and began walking down the hill. Footsteps echoed from behind as someone chased after him. Curious, Kakashi paused and glanced back up the hill and saw Sasuke standing there. "Instructor, is this just business, or personal too?" the young Uchiha asked. The hint of rebuke in Sasuke's query did not go missed by Kakashi, and unbeknownst to Sasuke, it made the older ninja grin faintly. Few ninjas had the daring to ask such a bold question to Kakashi, and even fewer would have had the insight to think of asking it in the first place. Sasuke was repeatedly proving that his stellar reputation in school was not unearned, and Kakashi made a mental note to observe the boy's development in the future. Uchiha Sasuke would go far, of that Kakashi had little doubt. And he was seldom wrong about things like this. The Junin shrugged and continued his descent toward the bridge. Maybe a little bit of both. Momochi Zabuza felt the intruder's approach long before he saw the shadow approaching through the mist. Having waited impatiently on the bridge for over an hour, he had almost given up hope on Konoha's team showing up, but just as he was about to leave, he felt a great chakra presence enter the area. A normal man would have never noticed it, but to someone as attuned to the ninja arts as Zabuza, it was immediately detected. The atmosphere around him rippled in response to the enormous amount of energy pulsating in the air, and the hairs on Zabuza's arms prickled in alarm. It was a strong aura, more than any ninja Zabuza had encountered in a long time. And then he saw a lone figure walking towards him, traversing through the fog effortlessly without a care in the world. Zabuza raised an eyebrow and a broad grin tugged at the corner of his lips as he recognized who it was. The silver hair, the lackadaisical gait, the characteristic face mask and concealed eye, there was no mistaking the infamous visage of Konoha's top assassin. A chill descended down his spine, a marvelous sensation that made Zabuza shiver. The ex-mist ninja rose from where he had been reclining and walked to the middle of the bridge, his hand coming to a rest on the bandaged hilt of the gigantic sword strapped across his back. "Hitaki Kakashi," Zabuza greeted him. "It's been a while, hasn't it?" "4 years to be exact, Zabuza," Kakashi replied coldly. "I was hoping the Mist Village had finally gotten their intelligence reports right when they reported you dead 2 years ago. It seems they were mistaken. What a shame." Zabuza laughed heartily, a loud guttural noise that echoed in the morning's silence. "That's what I liked about you, Kakashi. always making jokes at the most inappropriate moments. They always did make me laugh. Only silence met that comment, but then Zabuza had not really expected Kakashi to be in the mood for conversation. He knew Kakashi was here to kill him. Why else would the legendary Anbu officer be meeting a top-ranking criminal on an isolated bridge in the early hours of the morning? In truth, Zabuza was a bit flattered that Konoha's Hokage thought he warranted bringing Kakashi out of retirement just to kill him. Tell me something, Kakashi, Zabuza said. Do those kids you're hanging out with know you already knew that I would be here? Or better yet, when your Hokage found that I was playing bodyguard for Gato, did you personally request this mission? The cold glare emitted from the white-haired Junin's single eye was answer enough. Zabuza chuckled. You're still mad about that kid in your squad that I killed. You should have been expecting the betrayal. You should have been watching out for him. It's your fault the rookie is dead. Kakashi's gaze hardened further until his eye narrowed until it was but a thin slit radiating with lethal intent. I trusted you. He hissed. Trusting me was your mistake, the ex-mist ninja said with a shrug of indifference. No. The Anbu assassin shook his head. It was my choice. He drew a kunai from his vest and pointed the tip at the large sellsword's heart. I'm here to kill you, Zabuza. Submit and you have my word as a Konoha ninja that your death will be quick and painless. Resist and I can make no promises. Zabuza snorted derisively. You're good, Kakashi, but certainly not good enough to take me on. Let's find out. Zabuza smiled. His mouth was hidden by the bandages, but there was no mistaking the flicker of glee that sprung up in his eyes at Kakashi's bold challenge. Chuckling deeply, a menacing sound that resonated in the still morning air, he unsheathed his gigantic shark fin sword and slammed the blade into the concrete floor. It plowed through the cement-like paper, embedding itself firmly into the bridge in a shower of stone splinters. Arrogant as always, Hitaki, he said, I guess I'll have to kill you first and then. He broke off in mid-sentence and in a blur of motion, pulled his sword free and leapt toward Kakashi, his blade held high ready to strike. The swiftness of the unexpected attack caught Kakashi off guard and he barely raised his knife in time to meet Zabuza's massive sword. The two weapons clashed together in a storm of sparks, their metal edges grinded loudly against each other as each of the Junin sought to overpower the other. With a jeering cackle, Zabuza slid his blade away from Kakashi's and then struck again, cleaving at the white-haired ninja's legs. Deftly, Kakashi jumped backwards out of range, and in midair, flung his knife at Zabuza's face. It was easily deflected by the flat Zabuza's gigantic sword, but it gave Kakashi enough time to retreat and regroup. You've gotten soft, Hitaki, teaching kids at that stupid school. The renegade ninja leered. You sure you don't want your students' help? Maybe all you combined might be able to beat me. The renegade ninja charged forward again, his sword swinging. Kakashi hopped backward, each leap keeping him only a hair's breadth away from the sharp tip of Zabuza's blade. He made no attempt to retaliate, content to dance out of harm's way instead of launching his own offensive, but this came to no surprise to Zabuza. From what he knew of the legendary Junin, Kakashi was primarily a defensive ninja who relied more on his wit and guile to ensure victory than pure strength. That was not to say that the white-haired ninja was not without his own arsenal. The infamous Konoha assassin had not earned his rank as an Anbu captain by running and hiding after all. With a roar, Zabuza swung his sword in a deadly arc that would have taken Kakashi's head clean off, but Kakashi smoothly ducked under it. He rolled on his shoulder and slid across the cold concrete away from the menacing swordsman. His body tensed as if every joint in his body storing energy like a coiled spring, and then suddenly he launched himself at Zabuza. Inwardly the ex-mist assassin sighed in disappointment. It was a foolish maneuver, a hasty, improvised attack that had more flash than substance. Counter-attacking so quickly after a successful evasion was foolhardy, a rookie mistake as it left one woefully exposed to any subsequent follow-ups by their opponent. Zabuza would have thought such an error beneath a ninja like Kakashi, and in a way, he was saddened that their little skirmish would end so quickly. It would be a disappointingly truncated match that Zabuza had hoped would be epic in length, a chronicle of a clash between titans. But if Kakashi was so willing to hand him an easy victory, then so be it. The renegade ninja laughed and swung his sword at the Kakashi, but just as the blade cleaved through the Konoha instructor, Kakashi's body disappeared in a billowing cloud of white smoke. A shadow clone. Zabuza snarled. He spun around, wildly searching for where his opponent had vanished to, but he needed not look for long. The ground beneath his feet trembled, shaking and cracking as a tremendous force rocked the bridge. A second later, the ground erupted in a geyser of debris, and suddenly the obscured form of a fist cut through the thick cloud of stone and dust. The punch caught Zabuza solidly underneath his chin, knocking the tall ninja backwards through the air. The big sellsword slowly returned to his feet, stunned by the startling blow. In the middle of the bridge was now a cragged hole, and carefully extracting himself from the crater was Kakashi. "Still think I need help to beat you, Zabuza?" he asked, nonchalantly brushing debris from his hair. Zabuza smiled and threw his back in insane laughter. To think he had made the mistake of underestimating the man. It was such a sin that could only be atoned for with the blood of his enemies. The renegade ninja had killed dozens of men, perhaps hundreds, but all of them were meaningless compared to the prospective death of Hatake Kakashi. To kill a defenseless opponent was nothing, but to claim to life of a worthy combatant, someone who could fight toe-to-toe with one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist, well, that was an opportunity that did not come around every day. And Hatake Kakashi was indeed such an opponent. An infamous legend like himself, the enigmatic Junin was perhaps the only man that inspired such excitement in Zabuza's heart. "Good, Kakashi," he roared. "But not good enough. Now prepare yourself." Zabuza sheathed his sword and his hands disappeared in a haze of choreographed motion, seamlessly forming hand seal after hand seal in an incoherent blur. "Hydro clone technique," the renegade ninja bellowed. On command, a column of water exploded from the river. It rocketed high into the sky but then dispersed in the air, creating a deluge of water that came crashing back down on the bridge. Like waves smashing against the surf, the water fell hard but was quickly swept aside, drained back into the river from where it came. However, several puddles were left behind in its wake, and unlike normal puddles, they were in no hurry to dissipate. They were growing larger and larger, expanding and coalescing together until each individual puddle had created the vague form of a tall man. Kakashi watched the process detachedly, not even blinking as the water figurines, features hardened into the likeness of their owner. Where there once had been only one Zabuza were now 4, each an identical copy of the original right. They scowled and glowered across the bridge at Kakashi, waiting eagerly to see how he would react. His response was simple. Slowly, Kakashi reached up to his forehead protector and gently lifted up the tilted end, straightening it so that the band rode perfectly straight around his head. For a moment, an awkward sensation ran through his body as his left eye was once again exposed to the world. He kept it clenched shut, but already he felt so much more alive, as if his senses had amplified exponentially with the unveiling of his obscured eye. And that was just the beginning. "Zabuza," Kakashi said, "once I open this eye, your fate is sealed. This is your last chance to surrender." A chorus of raucous laughter erupted from across the bridge, their uncouth mockery and insult to Kakashi's ears. Slowly, the hidden eye opened. Sharingan.